Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at a story many of us think we know. The traditional narrative of the first Thanksgiving, celebrated almost 400 years ago in Plymouth Colony. And we're not just scratching the surface here. We've got the specific historical account, the one that really details the motivations, the crushing hardships, and the improbable success that led to that famous feast.
That's right. Our mission here for you is to get past the basics. We want to extract the core motivations that started this whole thing. The just devastating scale of the losses they suffered at first, and then the really surprising details of the cooperation and the feast itself.
So let's dive in. Let's start at the very beginning with the reason they left England. It wasn't about money.
Not at all. It was deeply religious. I mean, they were unhappy because the king, who was also the head of the church, was forcing everyone to use specific prayers.
And they just couldn't do that. They believed they had to worship in a very specific way.
Exactly. They were separatists. And for them, refusing to follow the state religion wasn't a choice. It was a necessity for their salvation. But the source makes it clear that refusal came at a huge cost.
A huge cost is putting it mildly. We're talking about persecution, having your property seized, being thrown in prison.
Or even being killed. I mean, the stakes were that high, which is what prompts that first move.
And interestingly, that first move isn't to America.
No, not yet. First, they went to Holland. They were looking for a safe haven. And for a while, they found it there. They got the religious freedom they were so desperate for.
But it wasn't a perfect solution.
No. A new problem came up. While they're, spiritually happy, they were struggling financially. The source describes them as being very poor. It was hard to find work and get by.
But even that poverty wasn't the main reason they decided to leave Holland. And this is the part of the story that I find really fascinating.
This is the real kicker. It was about the next generation. It was about their kids.
Right. Their children were growing up in this new culture, speaking Dutch, and, well, they were assimilating. The adults saw them becoming, and this is a quote, less godlike.
The kids didn't want to pray anymore, at least not in the same way. And for the parents, who had sacrificed everything for their faith, this was a crisis, a much bigger crisis than being poor.
So they saw their entire reason for being this unique religious community just fading away with their own children.
Exactly. And that's when they decide they have to make another move, a much bigger one. They decide on a pilgrimage to the New World, America. They chose the complete unknown over watching their community dissolve.
Which brings us to the Mayflower, a journey born out of this spiritual desperation.
And you have to picture this ship. It was small, designed for cargo, not for over 100 people.
And the conditions. The source is very specific. It was crowded, it was cold, incredibly uncomfortable, and the sea was rough.
The whole voyage took 2 months. 2 months crammed into that small, cold, damp space. They must have been completely exhausted before they even set foot on land.
And they arrive in November, of all times.
Right. The absolute worst time to arrive in New England. The land they saw wasn't some paradise. It was cold, there was snow on the ground, just rocks and hard, bare earth.
And they were in no shape to deal with it. Tired, cold, and hungry.
And this is where the story takes a really dark turn. That first winter. It wasn't just hard, it was catastrophic.
The source material lays it out pretty clearly. Many people got sick, they didn't have enough food, they didn't have proper shelter.
And the death toll was just staggering. They arrived with about 100 people by the time spring came.
Almost half of the people died. Just imagine that, losing someone nearly every other day for months. The psychological toll on the survivors must have been immense.
Absolutely, which makes what happens next feel like a miracle to them. The seasons finally change.
Yeah, the spring. After all that bleakness, the sun comes out, the snow melts, and you start to see leaves and flowers. For them, it must have felt like a sign that they had survived the worst.
But good weather alone wasn't going to be enough. They needed help. They needed knowledge. And that's when aid arrives.
The source mentions that some friendly Indians had actually visited them during the winter, but the real turning point comes with one person in particular.
Squanto.
Squanto. He's described as one of the kind Indians who stayed with them, and his contribution was, well, it was everything.
It really was. He basically taught them how to survive in this new place. He showed them how to farm the local soil, how to plant their crops.
Specifically corn, which was new to them, but also peas, wheat, and barley. This wasn't just a friendly tip. This was the knowledge that saved the colony.
And that successful planting season changes everything. The mood lifts. The source says the children found happiness and security that summer. After the horror of the winter, they finally had some stability.
So by the time autumn rolls around, they're in a completely different position.
Oh, completely. The fathers go out to the fields to gather the harvest, and it's a huge success. The crops grew so well they realized they would have more than enough food to last through the next winter.
What a moment of relief that must have been.
A profound relief.
Yeah.
And their immediate reaction was gratitude. They decide they need to have a celebration, a grand Thanksgiving party, to thank God for seeing them through.
And crucially, they invite their allies, the friendly Indians who had helped them survive.
Yes, their chief and a number of his people came. And this is where the account gives us these wonderful, specific details about the feast.
Let's talk about the menu. It was a true feast of abundance. Wild ducks and geese, great wild turkeys.
Deer meat, too. And then all the bread and cakes they could make from their new harvest of grain, plus fish and clams from the sea nearby. It sounds like it went on for 3 days.
And the image of the guests arriving is so vivid. This is a great detail for really picturing the scene.
It is. The source says they were dressed in deerskins. Some had a wildcat's furry coat hanging on their arm.
And their hair-long black hair falling on their shoulders, trimmed with feathers or foxtails. You can just imagine the scene, these two very different cultures coming together.
But for all their differences, they started the feast in the same way. The account makes a point of this. Before they ate, the Pilgrims and the Indians thanked God together for all his goodness.
A shared moment of gratitude.
Exactly. So if we pull back and look at the big picture, this is the traditional story, the one that's been passed down for nearly 400 years. It's a story of faith, incredible hardship, and ultimately cooperation.
So as we think about our own Thanksgiving celebrations, what does this deep dive into the source really tell us?
Well, I think when you sit down with friends and family, it's a chance to remember that the tradition comes from a place of real, incredible struggle.
Right. It wasn't just about a big dinner. It was about surviving a deadly voyage, a winter that killed half their people, and the humility of accepting help from strangers.
It encourages you to think beyond just being thankful for the food on the table,
Yeah.
and to also be thankful for what the source calls God's abundant blessings, but also for the human connections, for the Squanto figures in our own lives.
The people who show up with the exact knowledge or help we need when things seem impossible.
That's it. The core lesson here is about gratitude in the face of very recent, very real trauma. They weren't thankful for an easy life. They were thankful for survival. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful question to reflect on, I think.
It is.
How often do we really pause to acknowledge the person, the unexpected partner, who shared some piece of knowledge that turned our own deep hardship into our greatest harvest?